Hi guys, Viking Guitar here. Today we're going to do another little audio lesson. This one is not quite as Reaper focused, but is on something near and dear to my heart, which is figuring out how to play old video game music on the instrument of your choice. Whether that's guitar, or piano, or flute, or whatever it is you play, at some point you need to figure out what the melodies are. And sometimes you can do that just by ear, and those people are more talented than I am. What I like to have is an isolated breakdown of the different channels. So what we're going to go over today is how to take a source file from a game like Castlevania and through a series of tools break those down so you have isolated channels, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some tools within Reaper to kind of help you figure that out by ear, because some of these passages can be pretty fast. So today we're just going to look at sound files for original NES games and for Super NES games. We're not going to be talking about anything more extensive than that or anything different. No Genesis, anything like that. If you have questions about that, I am not the person to ask. But for right now, we can look at Nintendo and Super Nintendo, and this will probably help you at least point in the right direction if you want to figure this out for other consoles. So let's look at Nintendo first. Now, you might notice I have... This is all just stuff I keep on my desktop, but this is all stuff here specific to what we're going to talk about today. This is H.R. Giger's Alien Creature, which is one of my absolute favorite movie monsters. But we're going to arrange some stuff right here. And up here we've got stuff specific to the NES process, and down here we have stuff for Super NES. So let's talk about NES first. What you're going to need first off is a .nsf file, and I do not profess to know the legality of obtaining these. I know that I do own an original hard copy of Castlevania, and I actually use it frequently, so I have no qualms with obtaining a NSF rip of this. And this is just the data for the soundtrack. What you're also going to need is a program here called NSF Play. This is all Windows based, by the way. I don't have answers for you if you want a Mac solution, sorry. But NSF Play is what we're going to use. And if you open NSF Play, it brings up this cool little thing, and you can just drag and drop your file to it. And as soon as we do that, it's going to start playing. Something I think a lot of us remember. Now, if you look up top here, you'll see this says 1 of 54, so we can use the arrow keys to move between the tracks. With these NSF files, the entire soundtrack, to the best of my knowledge, is included in a single file. So we're going to go back to number 1. One thing about this program is if you're paused or stopped and you move to another file, it'll just start playing. But don't worry, you can hit stop and it'll automatically go back to the beginning. So what we want to do here is if you click on this guy right here, this brings up your options. And you can go to View and open up Channel Mask. And once Channel Mask is open, you can close this guy down. We don't need any more of that. Now, this has a whole bunch of different audio channels on it, and I would be lying to you if I said that I knew exactly what all of them are doing. But what I can tell you is that these 6 right here are the main audio channels for an NES, I believe. FDS might be something else, but we're not going to worry about that. And these VR6 ones, VRC6, are for some of those Famicom games had that special chip in there that allowed for extra voice channels, like the Japanese version of Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse, had extra channels that could use audio. So what we're going to do is we're just going to start by reversing all this so we can turn off everything, and we're just going to turn on the ones that might matter to us. Now, if you're working with the Japanese NSF file, or rather an NSF file from a Japanese version of a game, a Famicom unit, you might want to listen to these and see if there's any data there, but I know for a fact that this Castlevania one does not have that. So now, if we play one of these, what we can do is we can selectively turn on and off the different channels, and we can hear how that affects what we're listening to. Let's go over to Vampire Killer, the second track, because it's a bit longer. So you can see there's a bit of delay where I click. But this lets us isolate. And this is a good way for us to find out which channels we need to deal with. So if we just select these DMC and FDS ones, just listen through the track, and you should be able to tell pretty quickly if there's any data there or not. I mean, if you want to be sure, you can listen through the whole track, but you don't have to. One other thing that's important to note is this will show a full time of 5:05 or some number greater than the track you're listening to in all possibility. I don't know why that is. I believe it's taking the length of the longest track within this whole file, so don't worry about that. Anyway, so if we listen through this, we can play it back, and we can turn on and off channels. Like that. And what we can also do is we can isolate it down to one channel, and if we click on this red folder icon right here, we can open up a path to save that specific channel. Or rather, what we're doing is we're telling it to save the output of the program, but when we isolate that to one channel, we're just saving one channel. So pick a folder, and you want to name it something really super inventive like Square One for Square One, and then click Save. And you can see it's going to run through this whole thing. It's going to go all the way up to 5:05, or rather it did last time I did. Actually, we're going to do this with the first one. So let's go into our Castlevania folder. We'll delete the thing we just did, and we will now do it with this first one here. So Square One selected, go in here, SQ1, save, and it'll run through. And right, it goes all the way 5:05 on this guy. So we're just going to wait a moment here while it does that. In the meantime, appreciate the absolutely incredible creature design that is H.R. Giger's Alien. Guy passed away in 2014. Exceptional artist, exceptional visionary, and a big source of horror inspiration. Anyway, we're done. So once you get one channel, just arrow back to the first track because it'll automatically advance to the next track. Deselect that channel, select another one, click this, name it Square 2 or whatever you want. Click Save. It'll go through the process again. And basically, you probably see where this is going. You want to do this for every channel here that actually has audio coming out of it. And luckily, with these NES files, it's generally just these 5, Square 1, 2, Triangle, Noise, and DMC. At that point, you can listen to the FDS channel. I don't recall ever coming across anything on there. And we're not going to belabor the point because I've done this already, but if we open up what we've done here and we just click on it, you can see that in Media Player it is playing exactly what that output was. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over how to do this with the Super Nintendo files, and then we will open up Reaper and go into what we can do after that point. So for Super Nintendo, we're using a program called JCOM SPC. Once again, this is something you can find online for free. They offer it for free. And the sound files are a little different. The SPC files, or rather the music files for a Super Nintendo game are contained in SPC files, and each one of these is specific to one track in the game. So unlike the NSF files where it held the entire soundtrack, each one of these is usually going to contain one piece of music. For example, in this one, we're listening to the Super Metroid Brinstar Overgrown area, Brinstar Green. So if we open JCOM, unfortunately you can't drag and drop with this guy. Go to File, Open, and use this really kind of archaic folder structure to go down to where you want to be, select the file you want, click OK, and it should start playing. Hear that? That's awesome. I really like that. So from here, it's kind of a similar process. If you click Controls, it'll automatically bring up the control box here where you can set the volume level, stereo separation, and also checkboxes for the 8 channels. Now, once we start rendering these down, you're going to notice that it's a little different than it is with the Nintendo. But the basic process is the same. We want to start by browsing, finding a directory. We're just going to use the Super Metroid SPC one I made here because I've already rendered everything into rendered. So we'll select this guy, click OK, and just pick one channel. And when you hit record, it's going to start playing through in real time the whole song, and just through that channel. Now you might notice it's kind of changing instruments. What I found through my experience with this is that most of these SPC files, they're really good with managing their 8 channels to make the most use out of it. So you're not going to have a channel that necessarily has a lot of dead space. That dead space is going to be used to swap to other instruments so you can be recording more bang for your buck. So this process takes longer. Generally what will happen is it'll pick this play length for the intro of the song and then 2 repetitions of the main song, because a lot of these will set an intro with a loop point and then repeat that twice. So if you hear the song start to repeat, you can cut it off early. As soon as you hit the stop button, it'll finish saving this WAV file and it'll be complete at whatever point you hit stop up to. So for the sake of argument, we're just going to stop this now at 1 o'clock. Now we select or deselect channel 1, select channel 2, and you can just hit record again. It'll try and save it as the same file name, but since that file name already exists, it'll just add a parentheses 1 at the end, and you know, when we do the next one, it'll add a 2 and so forth. We can go through up to the point where we have everything. So we're just going to stop this here because I have cleverly already rendered everything in here, so we don't have to sit through and listen to 4 minutes of this times 8 times, because as much as I like the music, that's a boring video. So click close. Now what we want to do is we want to toss all this stuff into a digital audio workstation. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you probably know about this. You know what Reaper is. But for those that are uninitiated, Reaper is a program that lets you arrange multiple audio sources, like multiple WAV files or MP3 files, play them back simultaneously and edit them, do all sorts of cool stuff to them. If you don't have Reaper, you can download a fully functional demo of it at reaper.fm up here, and it is not a free program, but if you go to download it, the demo version is free. The demo is fully functional, it has no limitations, and it says you can use it for a 60-day evaluation, but it will not cease functioning after that point. It will just start nagging you to buy it, but if you're willing to hang out for the nag screen for a few seconds when you open it up, you can probably use it indefinitely. That being said, purchasing Reaper, if you're using it just as a hobby, or if you're using it professionally and making less than 20 grand a year, it only costs 60 bucks. So it's a good thing to buy if you start getting use out of it. Regardless, I'm not here to sell you Reaper. I'm here to show you how to use it for this purpose. So I need to switch my audio setup so we can talk about the next part. So I'll see you in a moment. All right, the audio system is switched over and we can now continue. So once you've downloaded Reaper and installed it, just open it up. I'm using Reaper 4. Reaper 5 is the newest one out right now, but the functionality should be essentially identical. So a quick version of how this works is on the left, you're going to see a series of rows that are each track, and then over here in the actual work area, you see it going across through time. This is your control to play, stop, go to the back, go to the end, that sort of thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by opening our Nintendo project here, and these were the ones I rendered out. We can ignore that. These were the ones I rendered out, and this is the full thing that I did earlier before I turned on the recorder just to set up the lesson. So you can highlight all these WAV files, just drag and drop them in Reaper. It's going to ask if you want them on separate tracks or all sequentially on one track. Let's do separate tracks. Now what you can do here is you can resize these guys so you can see all of them. But what you'll probably notice is that these are 4 tracks, and you can select them individually, these items that are on each track, and they have the names that we gave them: Square 2, Square 1, Noise, and Try. And you'll also see there's all this dead space at the end that we don't need. Now, one of the basic things about Reaper is if you click on an item and hit the S button, it'll split that. And what you can also do is you can click in the empty space and hit S to split all of the items, and then delete that excess. So that's all we need to do for this right now. Now what we have is we have 4 channels of pure NES goodness, and each one of these just has an individual sound on it. So if we listen through all of it, it's going to sound just like the NES game. Now, if we want to take one of these and listen to it by itself, we can either click this M button on all the others to mute the others, or Instead of that, we can just click on one of these S and hit solo, so we just listen to it. Now we can listen to one at a time. And if we want to turn up the volume of any of these, which we probably do, we'll just turn it up a little bit there. There. So at this point, it kind of goes back to you. What you need to do now is figure out how to play this. And there's no program that I know of that's going to listen to this and tell you what the notes are or where they are on a guitar fretboard or on a piano or anything like that. There are probably programs out there, but I don't use them. And I don't subscribe to that because they are error-prone usually. And figuring notes out by ear is a good tool to have, good skill to have. So there are two things that are really going to help us with this. The first thing is we can set a loop region. Now, if you click on this magnet up here, it'll turn off snapping to grid, so it won't align to these measure lines, and we can just click wherever. Now, if, let's say we're having trouble figuring out a note, like, let's say it's this first note. We're going to solo this track. Before you can even grab onto what it is, it might be going to the next note. So what you can do is you can click somewhere at the start of the note, hold Shift, and click somewhere at the end of the note, but not at the very end. And now when you play from the beginning, once it gets to this point, it'll just start looping in this region. So once you have that going, it's really easy to pick up a guitar or grab your piano or your ocarina or, you know, whatever, and just have this looping in the background while you hit play, and just fiddle around on your instrument until you find what note it is. Cool? And then, when you get to the next one, just hit Escape to remove that loop region, select a new loop region, figure that one out, Escape, select new region, like that. So that's one of two tools that are very helpful. The second of the two tools is down here. This is the playback rate. And what you can do with this is we can slow this down from 1.0 to, let's go down to like approximately 5. So this slows the whole thing down. And this will go down all the way to 0.25. Which is really cool, but it doesn't do us a lot of good because, as you can hear, it changes the pitch. Like that. However, Reaper is prepared for this. If you right-click on this and go to Preserve Pitch in Audio Items when changing master play rate, I bet you can guess what that does, ladies and gentlemen. Click on it. And now, as we turn it all the way down, we're going to hear a little bit of stretching artifacts, but it will be the same pitch. So it's the same as like that. So from this point on, it's just getting your hands dirty and doing the legwork. Usually what I do is figuring out tonality of noise instruments is usually not going to do much for you. So I just mute that one. I'm a guitarist mainly, so I'll grab a sheet of tab paper or something. I'll solo a track, and I'll just start here. I'll figure out note 1, note 2. If I'm having trouble with a passage, I'll slow it down. And you go through until the end. Then you unsolo it, mute that one, solo the next one, and keep going. Once you're done, and it's a great feeling. It takes a bit of time, but you will know when it's done that, assuming you haven't screwed up your, what's the word I'm looking for? Your figuring out the noteness process of it. As long as you've done that correctly, that's the only place for error. You have a direct rip from the video game, and you've isolated it per channel and figured it out. So cool, you did a thing, and now you can do more things with it. So we're not going to save this. So that's the NES process. The Super Nintendo process is slightly different. Because, as you might remember, I mentioned the Super Nintendo process. They tend to, they really like to maximize their efficiency with their use of channels. So, we're going to start same way, start a new project in Reaper, grab all your WAV files that you rendered out from whatever the hell that program's called, JCOM SPC. Great program, by the way. If I could just give a shout, I don't know if the makers of NSF Player, JCOM, SPC are going to watch this, but if you are, thank you guys. I hope you don't mind me pimping your products. I don't have the website, but anyone can Google it. Go get these things. They're great. Anyway, Super Nintendo. Grab all your stuff, drag it over here, separate tracks, good. By the way, when you're over here, if you click on one of these tracks and hold the control button and use your mouse wheel, it will very quickly adjust the zoom of all of them so it's easier to see. Now, when we listen through this, sounds good, right? And you can mouse wheel over here in this area to adjust the zoom, and you can see if there are, tracks that have dead space that, obviously you don't need to worry about that. But you'll notice an interesting thing, which is that, let's take this track, for example. We'll solo it. We'll embiggen it a bit so we can see it. So it starts with this sound that is almost a steel drum, some sort of, tonal percussive instrument. And then it switches to this choir patch. So if you're figuring this out just so you know how to play all of it, that's great. But if you're going to be arranging it for a band or figuring out how to play it so you can record a version of it or something, you probably want to switch this stuff up, because wouldn't it make sense to find all the choir patches that are scattered throughout these 8 tracks, cut them up and arrange them onto one channel so you can just figure out the entire choir line, and then do the same thing with the, tonal percussion instrument? So this is a longer process than doing it for the NES. And basically what it involves is you can double click over here to create a new track. You can do that as many times as you want, pretty much. And up here you can go to track, do a new track that way too. So usually what I do is I'll start with one here, and I'll listen through it. And at the point where it changes instruments, here we'll solo it so I know what I'm doing. Right here, I'll turn snapping off first off. And then at the point where it switches instruments, I'll hit that S key. Or conversely, you can right-click and go to Split Item at Cursor. And now what you can do is you can move this, just drag it down to that track. And then I would listen through to see if there's any other tonal percussion. And there isn't. So at that point, you can double-click in here. You can name this tonal percussion. You can rename this guy choir. And then I go through each track and cut it up and rearrange them, naming tracks and stuff. So I have what looks like, one line that has, let's say, all of the hi-hat on it, one line that has all of the other percussion, one line that has all the choir, one that has all the strings, one with all the tonal percussion, one with all the soccer whistle or whatever. And that way, when I'm going through and doing the transcribing process of listening through each one, and figuring out where these notes are on my guitar or piano or, bass clarinet or whatever, I know I'm working with one instrument line at a time. Anyway, that's it. The unfortunate reality is a lot of this is just kind of going through and doing it, but this should get you all set up and ready to do the process. So all you need to do after this is just the legwork. But this should set you up. So until next time, keep the world metal.